Hi, everyone. You might think that it's sometime between March 10th and March 15th by seeing Raj's face, but 6 months later, here we are, and it's not PIF, it's PIF 2.0, whatever that means. We've all been pivoting and trying to figure out what festivals look like, what watching a movie looks like, what PIF 2.0 even is, other than marketing speak. But what it really is bringing back some of our friends and colleagues and favorite filmmakers and favorite artists to share some work, to talk a little bit, and to figure out what comes next. So I'm so pleased that Raj, from his bookcase in New York, is able to join us. And you might see, camera left, his Cinema Unbound Award. Raj was with us in March as one of our Cinema Unbound Award honorees, and he was amazing. And he's still amazing and doing great things at MoMA, and he'll tell you and remind you a little bit about who he is and what he does. But we're just so pleased to pick up the conversation where we left off 6 months ago. And wow, what a world we have transitioned into. So Raj, maybe just share a little bit about who you are and what you're doing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, in many ways, I wish that we could just rewind, like time machine style, maybe, Amy and Raj instead of Bill and Ted, and we can just get in that time machine and go back to March 10th, I think it was. When was this Cinema Unbound Awards? Anyway, because literally I got on a plane in Portland, landed in New York, and I think like 24 hours later was in lockdown. And New York was sadly ahead of the curve in terms of all of that. But it's been an incredible journey. It's been painful. It's been a rich learning experience professionally in a lot of ways, and super fulfilling to understand how important cinema has been to people in all of its new manifestations. But that it's still so important to our soul in terms of like getting us through a time like this. And yeah, so I feel like I've aged 10,000 years since I was like last in your company, enjoying the richness of Portlandia. And I so wish we could go back to there and just fix all the wrong things that happened since then. But let's not do that. Let's be forward thinking. But I'm happy to kind of go through those 6 months a little bit. But anyway, yeah, I forgot. On background, Rajendra Roy, Chief Curator Film at MoMA, and Cinema Unbound awardee.
And Virgo, I'm just guessing. And Virgo, I don't know your sign.
Leo, cusp of Virgo. Yeah, I mean, come on. You can't tell I'm a Leo. Give me a break.
That's okay. My son's a Leo too. I get it. 100.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's been, as we've said a lot, so much change that it almost makes your head spin. And you use the Bill and Ted reference. I use a lot of cinema references. My favorite is Julie Andrews. Let's all start at the very beginning. I won't sing for you because it's inappropriate, but I do think maybe we can start at the very beginning, because I actually look at all of the phases of the last 6 months as my Norma Desmond phase, where I just kind of wandered around in a robe and like looked for the light for a while. And then there was the, Creature from the Black Lagoon phase, where I was like, what is this? And how do we tackle it? And is this something that's coming after us all in a way that we can even wrap our heads around? So maybe just start at, you came home, you quarantined, much like the Portland Art Museum and Northwest Film Center. I know that MoMA also shut down pretty immediately. What was your process in terms of what you were planning for the future and how you were working with your team and filmmakers? I imagine, knowing you well, you're a beacon for the New York film community. And I'm sure everybody and their Nana was reaching out and saying, Raj, WTF, right?
Yeah. Are we going to be okay? And, look, that professionally was terrifying not to be able to know. Of course, my answer was yes, we're going to be okay. Cinema culture is going to be okay. It is a pillar of our culture, and especially in New York, culture is what made so many of us come here, as you know, and deal with all of the madness that makes this, still the most one of the most delicious places in the world to live, is because of all of the access to that. But behind that, in all honesty, was a ton of uncertainty. I didn't know that we were going to be okay, and frankly, I have a little bit more confidence now. But it's the measure has been moved so far, right? Selfishly and in my poor me phase, which I had, I was like, oh my God, I've gotten my first and last ever honor, because everything I ever worked to build just evaporated in 24 hours. And, that self-pity and that kind of like, but it's mine, thing, had to go away quickly. And I probably should have made it go away quicker, but I also think that mourning process was important, right? To recognize that trying to hold on to what was, even 24 hours before, was not helpful, and was not helpful to me personally, and it wasn't helpful to the field, certainly. And I think the quick pivot that we were able to do at MoMA was so incredibly helpful, both personally and professionally. And that pivot involved, digital, right? And everybody was doing that. And it was very specific with us of like the assets we had access to and what we were able to trigger immediately. But honestly, that has kept me going. And now as we think about rebuilding towards a new cinema culture, knowing what we were able to accomplish in the last 6 months has really helped a lot, let's say.
I know the feeling. We shut down the festival, we shut down the center, and we shut down the museum in kind of 1, 2, 3 order. And as many folks know, and you certainly know, I moved to Portland at that point, maybe 6 months earlier. So it was kind of a similar vibe in that, wow, we've all been working so hard here to really make this idea of cinema unbound and to open the doors a little wider and be more inviting and try some new things. And oh boy, do I have to get in my in my car and drive back home head in hand? Luckily, no. Yeah. Luckily, other than colleagues and friends in New York, this is the greatest team I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And I think we all had our Norma Desmond phase, and then just picked up ourselves and picked up the phone, quite frankly. And what was really heartening to me is, there's such a vibrant culture here in the Northwest of film and filmmaking and art making and just kind of cultural practice. And everybody's very tight knit. And yet we really hadn't reached out kind of beyond our, Vancouver and Washington and Idaho and all of our friends, right? And what was really heartening, I'd say, after the picking up, was that we were able to call people and talk to folks and commiserate and think about things from as far away as the Middle East to as close to, our new friends in San Francisco with Ann Lai taking over, and new leadership in San Francisco, and our friends at Meow Wolf. I mean, there was just so many different folks that were all trying to figure it out, but the playing field was level. Nobody cared that we were from Portland, or that we were not MoMA, frankly. Everybody was taking calls, everybody was taking emails, and being supportive in a way that, frankly, I haven't really seen before. And I don't know whether you experienced that, because again, you're in New York, you're in a certain institution with, certain, with a certain background and a certain pedigree. Whereas for us, I think that, we really weren't on the map in that sense. We were very tight knit and, like I said, very hyper local, but it's been amazing to talk to all those folks, and even to distributors who are also trying to figure out what's working and what's not. So maybe if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what you were seeing in that respect.
No, absolutely. But just to follow on that, I think if I hadn't come out of scrappy independent film organizations, I wouldn't have been able to make it through, right? Like if I had spent my entire career at these monolithic institutions, it would have been a lot more difficult to pivot. And I mean, it's been 20 years since, I was running a tiny little queer experimental film festival, but believe me, that skill set came in super handy, right? Of like, yep, okay, so we lost this person. I mean, we had a wave of retirements. We were very, very fortunate that we didn't have furloughs or layoffs, but a lot of that was we had a voluntary retirement program in place at the exact moment that the shutdown happened. So we lost a lot of colleagues happily to an enhanced retirement package, but it also meant like, okay, yes, I was once a film shipper in my life, you know, and like if I have to schlep prints around the building, I actually know how to do that well, you know, and my muscles aren't as great as they were in their 20s, but I'll figure it out. But I think that sense, so actually going back to the instincts, the mentality, and that mental muscle memory, at least, of working for an independent film organization made all the difference. And also gave me the encouragement to say, okay, yes, on the one hand, as the leader of this organization, I have to be the one who reassures the field that there will be a cinema culture and the other side of this, right? And if, by God, MoMA is the last place on earth that you watch a 35 millimeter print in a cinema, we will do that. And I've been saying that actually for years. I just meant that like 100 years in the future, right? Like not in my actual lifetime. And I'm still confident that that won't be the case. But I had to reassure, but on the other hand, I had to make sure that we can do that. We can all do that in a scrappy way. And very fortunately for me, folks like you, all the way through, you know, the Toronto Film Festival at this point, have demonstrated that scrappiness and manifested it into real, worthy, fulfilling events that are propelling the culture right now. So in many ways, we're learning from you all. And again, like that's where I had my formation, and that's where I'm looking now of like, how do we move this all forward? But again, like I know you watched, and hopefully some of our friends out in Portland watched the conversation I did with Todd Haynes, for example, another Cinema Unbound awardee last March. And that conversation, you know, I think meant so much more than it would have been even if we were on stage watching his new documentary, which, you know, of course, I'm dying to share with everybody on a big screen. But because it was the outlet that we had, and the only time that Todd had agreed to do a talk or was able to do a talk because he's in production and all of this, it actually had a lot more meaning in that moment. And I think that that's what we've discovered is there are ways of translating this format into something that is actually way more meaningful than we could have ever imagined.
It does seem more personal at this point, and less formal. And, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about is it needs to feel, as cinema as a whole, less like a country club for the some and more equitable and resourceful for those that want either to have their story heard or want to listen a little harder and a little deeper. And I know, as we said, we were able to pivot just like you to some of the virtual screenings, and we were so pleased. We didn't know. I mean, every day I wake up and I feel like it's a grand experiment, right? Of like, what will today bring? Today's bringing a ton of rain. So, you know, we're not going to show Pee-wee's Big Adventure tonight. Damn it, right? But we will.
Pee-wee's Bigger Adventure. Can he do it?
It's going to be even bigger, and maybe Joe Manganiello will show up. It'll be fantastic. But, you know, we tried this, and what we found, you know, you mentioned again the Cinema Bound PIF. With that, we were on our way to kind of breaking down some of that boundary here in Portland, and we had about 40% new audiences that had never set foot in our doors. Yeah. You know, and with the virtual, it really just blew the roof off the mother. Yeah. We were the second highest market for a number of weeks for a number of different films, with distributors kind of calling us and again just going, "Who are you? Are you the one in Seattle? Like who?" But, you know, December and Ben have done a tremendous job pivoting and just figuring it out right alongside them, kinks and all, right? But let's talk a little bit, you know, about some of the things you're seeing that maybe are inspiring you. I know what's been inspiring us, in addition to, of course, everybody else in the world watching Tilda Swinton's Golden Lion speech, it is really the drive-in. And some of us grew up with it, some of us it's novel. But we've watched everything. I mean, apparently a lot of people love to have sex during moonlight in their vans. That is a fun fact. December
Really?
has met fishermen that have come out of the water wondering, who is this? Ben now knows how to jumpstart Teslas. He's got a whole side hustle with that. But, it again goes back to what we were just talking about, where it's like, movies are communal and movies are art and movies are brilliant, but they also bring people together in really unexpected ways. So I would say, our drive-in experience has been the thing that, just on the surface has inspired me, but just from almost like a humanity perspective, it's just like, we keep teasing each other, like, we'll put that one in the memoirs, because you see everything in that gravel pit. So what's been inspiring you, and what have you been seeing out there that you're like, you know what, they're onto something?
So I definitely want to hear Ben's story about the Tesla story, but actually I'm wondering if I would have just let that one die there. Like, just a bunch of dead Teslas lying around sounds kind of awesome right now. But no, so I bought a car back in May or whenever, the earliest we could buy cars in New York, because you weren't allowed to go to dealerships or whatever. So I bought an old Volvo, and anticipating not that there would be drive-ins again everywhere, but just like getting out of the city and that kind of thing. So in our old Volvo, my husband and I went to the opening of New York Film Festival, which was one of Steve McQueen's. He's made this kind of omnibus film serial movie, and the opening film was a chapter called Lovers Rock, which, without giving too much away, I mean, it's unbelievably beautiful and soul changing, and it's essentially a house party, and set in 80s London in an all Jamaican immigrant community. And so you have this amazing reggae soundtrack, or reggae infused soundtrack, let's say. And so, we're just transported. We're sitting with other people in their cars, but near each other, and watching this incredible work of art, a new work of art on a big screen. But it's such a good soundtrack, and we're just like, we just want to dance, like it just, so it was like heart crushing in a way, because just want to get out of the car and dance with everybody and have our joints and like whatever, but you can't smoke a joint and drive home from Queens, right? So, or you can't do any of that in New York because it's not legal, like it is for you guys, I think, but whatever.
Come to Portland, you'll be fine.
Exactly. So it's, but that magical experience of like going to a drive-in in Queens for the first time, that is something I do think there will be, we will miss those moments of newness, right? Or I know when we finally go back to the cinemas in New York, and when I'm finally able to welcome folks back. So just in terms of like where we're at here in New York at this point in late September, coming into October in New York, MoMA has reopened. We've been open for about a month. We opened on August 27th. That was a month or so later than we had been promised by the state government, but museums were taken out of phase 4, which was our last reopening phase. But then finally we were able to reopen, and it was this deep breath of relief, right? Of being able to welcome folks back, have all the staff feel like we're engaged in something that's actually connecting with an audience. And thank goodness, and I talked a little bit about, I think when I was in Portland and in the past, MoMA totally revamped its offering last year. We just actually reopened our new building October, 1 year ago, basically. And that includes a whole new narrative of modernism that includes the moving image from the outset, right? From the late 19th century through the present, acknowledging that, modernism has always been multimedia. It's always incorporated all the art forms, and MoMA has always been interested in that. We've just never told that story publicly. So film is in all the galleries or throughout the galleries. So I'm not like terribly distraught that everyone's going to come to MoMA and it's like, where's movies? But we can't open our theaters. And so I look forward to that day. But until then, and then last night, was Pedro Moldovar's, speaking of Tilda, New York premiere with his new long form short, The Human Voice. And, I did Pedro's retrospective a couple of years back here at MoMA. And so he asked me to take photos because he couldn't be here. So we've got big photos of him and Tilda on a blow up screen over New York Harbor, because this was at the Brooklyn Drive-In. which is on a pier, and you got the Statue of Liberty and the Staten Island Ferry going by, and again, like magic, just magic. Yeah.
That's amazing. We also, I think we've been open a little over 2 months. Funny enough, we're phase 1 and still phase 1.
Oh, wow.
But so we can have 100 people in the museum at this point. So we have not reopened our theater either, but we can have different folks walking through the galleries. And then our pivot, which was surprising, we were honest with our partners. The Venice Biennale has its VR arm, right?
Yeah.
VR and experiential arm that runs concurrent with the Venice Film Festival. And it's run by Liz Rosenthal and Michel Rayac. And I've been lucky enough to work with them as a side hustle for a few years. And they just said, hey, we need headquarters and satellites all over the world. Would you want to be our US headquarters? Fantastic. And of course, on paper, it was like, well, fuck yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's try that. The Biennale hasn't done this in 127 years. Let us be the guinea pig, sure. Yeah. But there was a definite moment where I went, oh my God, like this is either going to be feast or famine. This is either going to be people are going to come out in droves and be needing to leave the house and transport themselves and have these experiences, or it's going to be crickets. But to figure out how to make it safe and how to help people basically put a face mask on with a mask and transport themselves. I would say that's also been a huge inspiration, is just thinking of film in a different way. And VR and experiential is not film, but it's influenced by some of the things that obviously we know and love so well in cinema. But what really moved me for a bunch of them was, no matter whether they were super advanced and great camera work, or whether they were more experimental or animated, I felt like I was in the movie or in the piece or in the art in a way that, even being a super nerd that has my own headset at home and has been working in the field for the last few years, I hadn't experienced that before. And it was super raw, because you can't cry in VR or it fogs up your lens. So
which is very problematic, because I have to say I've had some of the most emotional experiences with the moving image in a VR setting, right? I never thought about that. Yeah, crying's not allowed. No crying in VR.
No crying in baseball, no crying in VR. So, well, I can only imagine that you're on 47 Zoom calls a day and talking with colleagues and talking with folks to try and figure out what comes next. And no one has a crystal ball, although we said we need to have a Zoom where we all have crystal balls or 8 balls or something, or reading the leaves, what everybody's thing is, and see if people can come up with some things. Yeah. But, we've seen some of the fall festivals. We've seen some places slowly but surely reopen. We're looking to friends in Asia and Europe and the Middle East as they're also trying things. What are some of the main things that you all are grappling with? I don't think anyone has answers, but what are some of the main questions that you all are thinking through?
Well, look, I mean, and this obviously, both New York at a certain point, but Portland certainly has been at the epicenter of concurrent and probably equal, if not more important, recognition, and that is that we live in a deeply racist society, and the efforts around anti-racism and social justice continue and must inform everything that we do. Certainly as institutions, but also as just, as basic as, who we're addressing and the type of offering that we're bringing to our audiences and making sure our audiences are evolving. And we are just so blessed to have people like you and Eugene Hernandez and, Tabitha Jackson and all of these incredible minds, the diverse minds at the heads of our festivals right now. And you all took over at a moment, I know you all were hired to bring change. Did you know the level and the volume of change that you would be involved in bringing? Of course not. But could we have been in better hands at this moment? Probably not, and my heart goes out to you all. But again, linking arms, I think we can forge a future which not only responds to the cataclysmic, how do you say it? I'm not saying it right, economic challenges that our field faces, but also the real necessity of fundamental change in terms of who has access to the resources of this industry, who are we talking to, who are we addressing, and who are we including in the range, the scope of what this industry does, what the field does, what the art form can do, has always had the potential to do. So that reset, I'm all for. I'm all for. It doesn't mean you throw everything away, but it means that whatever you're doing, whatever you're retaining, and whatever you're pushing forward has to be seen through a new lens. And I think at MoMA, we have the double responsibility, not only as an exhibiting venue, but as a collecting institution, to see both evaluate what we've done and how we've done so far. And fortunately, MoMA has really been taking that on. There was a whole volume written about, it's called Among Others, and it's about Blackness at MoMA. And it's a really valuable read. If anybody's curious about what institutions are doing to interrogate themselves about their relationship to racism, anti-racism, and ways forward, but implementing that in a swift way is going to be critical. And obviously that happens in dialogue with artists. It happens in dialogue with people who have never been invited to institutions. And so that is a priority for me right now, and making sure that when the lights come back on fully, that we are seeing more of the world in our venues and through our programs. And honestly, for us, who is represented in cinema history, because that ultimately is part of the biggest part of our responsibility.
You're here. That's what we're working on as well. And I think, just doubling down on that, also just de-siloing and inviting more folks to the table that way. Obviously, we are a part of a museum as well. And so we have a bit of a symbiotic relationship, I would say, aspirationally, as MoMA and the Northwest Film Center being more the PS1, the kind of, together but separate.
Yeah.
That said, I think there's more crossover than ever with artists, fine artists, with television makers, with musicians. Portland's pretty amazing in that way, is that people, unlike my friends in New York who are like, I am a filmmaker. Yes. I am a filmmaker, and I am a brain surgeon, and I am a dancer, and I also make weird, wonderful, quirky little animations. And I think that that's the future. And I think that that's the part that we can uniquely add to the soup. But I think that that's taking a little more work as well on both a funder side, but also on a creative side, because you do need both, right? Like the whole thing that we've been talking about is sustainability. That's always been an issue for arts culture, right? But now even more so with, as you said, the global pandemic, with issues around social justice that are, just beginning to be scraped at the surface. And for us, also the smokes and fires. So, cue the locust, right? But it's not a poor me. It's more of just a realization of, in those moments, you find the strengths and you see the amazing lights that are out there, and bringing those folks together and saying, you have something to say, talk to this other person, and let's figure out how to make not only, here in Oregon, a sustainable place to work, but also be a connector to the outside world. Because I think more and more, that's the next thing for us, is to make sure, much like we talk to each other a little more often, and others are reaching out and saying, wait, how did you do that? We want our artist community and our funder community to feel like, yeah, it's okay. If you love photography, or if you collect Monets, or if you collect Stratocasters, fantastic. There's still something for you within this space, even if you don't, and God forbid, but you don't love to sit in a dark theater and watch, a 35 or a 70 millimeter print. So I think that's really important for us as well.
Yeah, no, amen to that. And, again, I think by not sticking in those siloed categories, that's when you also get to open it up to artists who have been excluded from those silos, right? And I think that it's a little scary for some, but exhilarating for those of us who understand what that's going to mean for the future, which is just 100% innovation and joy and discovery. So
well, anything else that you might want to share with us, or might want to tell us about that we haven't covered?
My gosh.
I mean,
Well,
there's
I
so
signed
much
up
that
to
it's
be.
like, wow, do we contain it all in 30 minutes, or do we just we ramble on and
Well, we
go
could
to
go on and on,
cocktail
but
hour?
honestly, yesterday I had a learning experience. So I signed up to be a poll worker here in New York City, and I went to my poll worker training, and I realized that it is super hard. Like, it's hard work and really complex, and I really have mad respect for folks who do that on a regular basis. I totally get why it's such a shit show to vote because it is hard. Like, I don't, how am I going to learn how to do this in 4 hours kind of thing? But I do think participating in as a citizen, it extends beyond just your niche. And I think that is, while it's always been, and I was raised by folks, my parents who were very politically active. You know, reminding yourself that being a citizen requires you to take that into your profession, but also to engage in a civic nature beyond that, whether it's marching, which again was so important for so many of us and remains so important, but just that bit of it for the next couple of weeks, I think, is where a lot of my focus is going to be, and just encouraging as many members of my team to find that outlet here at MoMA, but also out in the world, is what we've got to do. So, yeah.
I love it. And I'm coming from a slightly different lens as a mother of two, but I have to say that, I grew up in the South, which has a lot of really wonderful qualities, but a lot of challenges that we've spoken of already, and certainly around voting and, just talking with my kids in a really honest and open way about what's going on in our country and the changes that we want to be and the changes that we want to see, and having them be able to articulate that to their friends and understand that at a third grade to sixth grade level. I wish that I would have known some of the things that they know and had the conversations at the dinner table that they are very open about and understanding, and it almost just simplifies and purifies things. And, I think that would extend also to cinema, in that I've been able for the first time to kind of see that through their eyes. And, my Ben, again, sweetheart that he is, gave my little daughter Reese's Pieces for her first screening of E.T. And she's just like, yeah, E.T. for life, Ben for life. But like, it's those little human things that are connecting us at this moment and reminding us that while cinema is beautiful and imperfect and unbound, it also is a great connector, and it connects us to who we are and to who we are as a nation, hopefully. It's been a rough week again, right? Take your shot of tequila. But I think, I find some heart in being able to see maybe the world a little simpler through their eyes. And I hope that, if others have children in their lives in whatever capacity, that they really are including them in this moment, because it can be a scary world for all of us grownups, all of us that are 44. But I think by sticking together and talking about these things and having even these kinds of conversations and sharing them outward, it just reminds people to get out and vote, to talk to younger people about your passions and about the things that matter, and to get out there too and make sure that we're being change. We're not just talking about it, but we're actualizing what it is that we want to see out there. And I think that hopefully we'll see in our theaters, and hopefully we'll see in our museums too, as things open up a little more. But I'm just so thrilled that we got to spend a little Zoom time together in front of your beautiful bookcase. Yeah, you're making me look. I have like one Artie poster, and then my husband's Pearl Jam collection of posters around
No,
me.
I love your is that like a Magic Lantern print? It looks like kind of.
No, it's actually from an exhibition it was called Arti Moda, and it was cinema and fashion in Florence. So I think it's a very, very poorly lit Man Ray that's not original in any stretch of the word. So.
Yeah. But no, look, so critical to maintain these connections, and just thrilled that Portland is now part of my brain space and connective tissue in terms of thinking about the future of the world. And want to thank everyone there again for welcoming me so warmly back in 1,000 years ago in March. And I know that those connections now, when we recognize how critical they are and how straightforward they can be, a huge benefit of technology is the ability to stay connected. I know that collaboration will be easier and more necessary moving forward. So look forward to lots of it and seeing everybody again soon. Well,
thank you, Raj. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for PIF 2.0. We'll continue to expect the unexpected, if I can get it out of my mouth without more coffee. But thank you, everybody, for coming by and showing up. And hopefully we'll all be able to go to MoMA again someday very soon. And hopefully we'll get Raj back for a party weekend in Portland to enjoy all of the things that Portland and the Portland Art Museum and Northwest Film Center have to offer. So
look forward to
cheers.
It. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. All right.
Bye.